since now. Where were you since?
News editors, gentlemen of the press. The Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, held its 301st meeting on July 21st and 22nd, 2025, to review recent economic and financial developments and the outlook. All 12 members of the committee were in attendance. Decision of the MPC. The committee decided to maintain the current monetary policy stance and hold all policy parameters constant as follows. 1. Retain the monetary policy rate, MPR, at 27.50%. 2. Maintain the asymmetric corridor around the MPR at plus 500 to minus 100 basis points. 3. Retain the cash reserve ratio, CRR, for deposit money banks at 50% and for merchant banks at 16%. And 4, keep the liquidity ratio unchanged at 30%. The decision was premised on the need to sustain the momentum of disinflation and sufficiently contain price pressures. Maintaining the current policy stance will continue to address the existing and emerging inflationary pressure. The MPC will continue to undertake rigorous assessment of economic conditions, price development, and outlook to inform future policy decisions. Considerations. The committee acknowledged the decline in headline inflation in June 2025, the third consecutive month of deceleration. This was largely driven by the moderation in energy prices and stability in the foreign exchange market. Despite these positive developments, members observed the uptick in month-on-month headline inflation, suggesting the persistence of underlying price pressures. The continued global uncertainties associated with the tariff wars and geopolitical tensions could further exacerbate supply chain disruption and exert pressure on the prices of imported items. Members also noted the continued stability in the banking system, evidenced by the stable financial soundness indicators, FSIs, which would further be supported by the ongoing banking recapitalization exercise. The MPC noted that 8 banks have fully met the recapitalization requirements, while others are making progress towards meeting the deadline. The committee thus urged the management of the bank to sustain its oversight of the banking system to ensure continued resilience, safety, and soundness of the financial system. Price and other developments. Headline inflation year-on-year declined to 22.22% in June 2025 from 22.97% in May, primarily driven by the moderation in energy prices, especially cooking gas, wood, charcoal, and diesel. Food inflation year-on-year, however, rose to 21.97% in June 2025 from 21.14% in May, attributed mainly to the increase in the cost of processed food. Core inflation, that is, all items less farm produce and energy, also increased to 22.76% in June 2025 from 22.28% in May, reflecting an uptick in the cost of information and communication, housing and utilities, and personal care and social services. On a month-on-month basis, headline inflation rose to 1.68% from 1.53%, largely due to increases in the price of services and imported food. The committee acknowledged the efforts of the federal government in improving security and its impact on food production. Members thus urged the government to continue its support towards timely provision of high-yielding seedlings, fertilizers, and other critical inputs for the current farming season. The MPC also noted the sustained stability in the foreign exchange market, accentuated by improved capital flows, earnings from increased crude oil production, rising non-oil exports, and significant reduction in aggregate imports. Real GDP in the first quarter of 2025 grew by 3.13% compared with 2.27 and 3.38% in the corresponding and preceding quarters of 2024 respectively. In addition, recent data on the Purchasing Managers Index indicates that the Nigerian economy remains on an expansionary path. The external sector also remains stable and resilient, despite persisting uncertainties in the global macroeconomic environment. Gross external reserves rose to 40.11 billion on July 18, 2025, representing about 9.5 months of import cover for goods. Global developments. Available projections suggest that global output recovery continues at a gradual pace. However, recent developments, especially the persistent tariff war and the geopolitical tensions, may continue to disrupt supply chains and exert upward pressure on the price of imports. Disinflation in the advanced economies has slowed, prompting major central banks to be cautious of upside risks to inflation. In the emerging markets, central banks continue to calibrate monetary policy to their domestic conditions, noting the persistent risks to inflationary pressures. Outlook. Staff projections indicate a further decline in inflation in the coming months, underpinned by the current tight monetary policy stance, stable exchange rate, declining PMS prices, and moderation in food prices as the harvest season approaches. Given the persistent uncertainty in the policy environment and underlying price pressures, monetary policy will need to maintain its current stance until risks to inflation recede sufficiently. The committee remains committed to the bank's price stability mandate and would take appropriate measures to foster stability and confidence in the economy. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for Monday 22nd and Tuesday 23rd of September 2025. Thank you. Yes, way before I came into this seat. But for the benefit of our viewers, I think it may be important to say something about why the Article 4 of the IMF is important. Article 4 is important because you find the IMF is considered a credible institution. And whatever the IMF says, what it comes out with, potential investors are interested. Many take a cue from that in making their decisions. And by the way, let me not restrict it to the IMF alone. There are other institutions that on a regular basis, perhaps you may argue not as rigorously and in depth as the IMF would do, but there are other institutions that do similar things. For example, you hear regularly of the rating agencies. The last one that did something on Nigeria, to the best of my knowledge, is Moody's. And they really had stayed away from looking at this for a while. So they did do their own review on Nigeria, and very happily they gave us an upgrade, which is in line with what others have been doing. Again, to re-emphasize, these are the things that potential investors take a cue from. It's very important to them. Now, I would say that the findings of these institutions are really not dissimilar. They are not dissimilar. There's a feeling that the Nigerian authorities have taken bold, transformative measures to help to properly reposition the macroeconomic fundamentals of the country. There's the general feeling that they've moved, and you talk about the monetary side in particular, we've moved towards the monetization, the discontinuation of the monetization of fiscal deficits. The foreign exchange market is working a lot better and more smoothly, with the result of which it has encouraged inflows into that market. Of course, reference is constantly being made to the fact that Nigeria has moved away from the very difficult situation where there were subsidies on the foreign exchange and, I beg your pardon, on the fuel subsidies, on the fuel side. And of course, reference is made to the fact that these measures, painful though they may be, have resulted in stability in the foreign exchange market. There's positivity with our trade surplus, and it has restored investor confidence. So I think those are all things that have been able to demonstrate, okay, across the board, not just with the IMF, but across the board, that the policies that we have embarked upon are bringing out results, and that inflation is gradually coming under greater control. And very importantly, Nigerians are having greater confidence in their own currency. I was quite struck in having a discussion with somebody just yesterday, and he showed me a dialogue that he had with his travel agent, where he was owing the travel agent some money, and the travel agent said, please, I know you normally give me my money in dollars, but I'm very happy to take it in naira. Those are the things that are happening across the board. You all, as members of the press, have been covering these activities for a very long time. A lot of what you see going on now is transformational, and they are here to stay. The differences that we had between the parallel market rate and the official rate, you can all see it yourselves. Some of the banks are now allowing you to use your Naira cards when you travel. Those things are here to stay. They are not a short-term measure. They are here to stay. And as I said, as more and more of vigilance, transparency, rebuilding trust, I'm very, very confident that we can only but have an improvement in the positive signals that we have seen coming out, and that the IMF and others are also noting. You spoke about recommendations, and yes, there are recommendations. okay, for us to, of course, build more resilience. In other words, you may be here today, but you have to ensure that you are building sufficient buffers for uncertainties into the future. There's also the recommendation to ensure that you stay the course, that you do not start something that you cannot finish. And of course, we will not do that. And I know many of you have heard me say that severally. We will not do that. We will ensure that that collaboration that is necessary to reduce uncertainty, because let's face it, nobody likes to invest in places where there's potential to lose money. They come in where the environment is enabling. And we have to be consistent in all our policy thrusts and all the things we do to give the confidence to the outside investing public and, of course, to Nigerians as well.